For everyone that has joined us so far, thank you. And I'm just going to start out by going over some of the handouts. So this is going to be the second webinar that we are offering continuing education. So if you look at the handouts, there is the CE evaluation under handouts, and then also an agenda for today. Just kind of captures what we're going to be talking about and then has some contact information on there. So I just wanted to point out that on agenda item number 5, it says register for the county's next event on December 13th. I just got word back that that has actually already been sold out. And so we will talk about that more in the webinar, and we'll talk about how you can still participate and write up an after action report. All right, I also sent out the PowerPoint slides in a link from GoToWebinar where it just said, if you want to print out the slides ahead of time, you can click here. I'll also send them out afterwards. That way everybody has that. I wasn't able to put the slides as a PDF under handouts today just because we have a lot of different documents to talk about. But those will be available, and of course we put this video up on YouTube afterwards. So we have a few more people joined us just in the last minute, so we'll go ahead and get started here. If I can get this to go. All right, so Chris Sandoval from LA County Department of Health Services and Rich Widerynski, who normally joins us and gives us an update from the DRC meetings. They're actually in a meeting right now at the Henry Mayo Disaster Resource Center. So I will be just presenting myself, and then Jason Belden will be joining us in a little bit. And then we will hear back from Rich on the next webinar about what the DRCs are going to do in the next month or so. He did give us an update that one thing that came out of some of the DRC meetings lately was if your facility gets evacuated or there is some kind of roadblock put in place and your staff is getting stopped by maybe like CHP or something, and they're trying to go to work and the authorities aren't letting them pass those disaster lines, or however it has been playing out, having a photo ID with your facility's information on there is what the authorities are looking for when your staff is trying to get past some sort of roadblock and try to come into work. So we've actually seen that quite often during disasters, is that the law enforcement won't allow staff members to reach their facility, even though you're trying to do this emergency staff recall, trying to shelter in place. So that's something to think about. We haven't really ever brought that up before, so that was kind of a little nugget of information from Rich, and hopefully we'll hear more from him on the next webinar. So just following along on our agenda here under handouts, if you just joined us, please check that out. The agenda will kind of outline what we're talking about today, and we're going to cover sort of what your options are for participating in the county's exercise a week from tomorrow, I think. Yeah, so the 15th, Thursday, is when there will be an alert going out on ReadyNet, on CAHF, and you can decide how to play along with the county's exercise scenario. And we will sort of do a refresher of what the exercise scenario is, and then how that would look in a long-term care facility today. So just really quickly, I wanted to do a poll and sort of gauge how many people have registered for the county exercise on the 15th next week. So the county was doing registration via Eventbrite, and we've been putting that link out for a couple months now, and then their registration closed on October 31st. And so we have some people still trying to sign up. Unfortunately, I did ask LA County if they would take some latecomers, and they said that because of the sheer number of facilities trying to participate, that they are being firm on that cutoff date. So I'm just curious to see how many of our sort of webinar regular listeners did get onto that Eventbrite for November 15th. So let me just roll this poll really quick. We'll spend maybe just a minute on it and launch that. And so going back to the agenda really quick while we give everyone a minute to fill out the poll. So on agenda item number 5, it says register for the Exercise Evaluation Conference on December 13th. I did hear back just maybe half an hour ago that Eventbrite has already been closed as well. So we're going to talk a lot today about how you're going to fill out your after action report after the exercise is complete. So just note that agenda item number 5 is no longer available. Okay, so it looks like our listeners, so it's about 67% did register on the Eventbrite, and then about 32% did not. And so if you didn't, that is okay. I still recommend doing the exercise, and because you can still make it a functional exercise at your building, and you still do need to have that annual full-scale exercise. Let's see. So again, here is just a quick snapshot of the DRC program. And so currently there's a meeting going on at Henry Mayo. And by the way, thanks everyone for joining us at 10 a.m. I know our time is usually 2 o'clock, and we just had to move it because of a webinar conflict here at CAHF. So I appreciate everyone on today. And again, here are some of the common acronyms that we will be using in the next week for the exercise coming up. And so right here, this LACOMHE, that is the LA County version of the statewide mental health exercise. And so joining me right now is Jason Belden, the DPP manager.
Hi.
And so we haven't gotten too far in, just covering the acronyms. And we're going to sort of dive in here and review the upcoming events here. So if you are planning to use ReadyNet to complete the exercise, make sure that you have your login information and your password all ready to go. If it's not working for you, you'll need to request it from ReadyNet. And just because they are sort of working overtime right now, they have a cutoff date for when they will be doing those return requests of the information or the login, username, and password. So if you don't know if your ReadyNet account is active, please check today. And if it doesn't work for you, you'll need to email ReadyNet or email me, and I'll email ReadyNet and make sure that your request gets put in as soon as possible. I'm not sure if you submit it on the 12th, if that means they will get it back to you in time. So the earlier, the better. Let's see. So again, unfortunately, the Eventbrites have already been closed for the exercise and then also the December event, but
that doesn't mean you can't do it at your facility. It just means that you're not signed up with the...
Definitely, yeah, definitely need to still try and follow along. So our last webinar, we talked about sort of the process of how to organize this at your building. Sort of breaking down who does what and how you actually activate your emergency operations plan. So again, the objectives for long-term care facilities for this exercise are to activate your emergency operations plan. So that means, deciding if you're going to shelter in place, if you need to lock down, if you need to evacuate, and activating your communications plan. So that looks like getting on ReadyNet, responding to polls, giving those status updates. But we also want to think about who would do all of those actions if the administrator or your incident commander is not present. So part of the other thing that you're testing is how would this work sort of in that worst case scenario when the point person is away. And if you want to go back and review the last webinar that we did, we put all those up on YouTube at that link there. So then today we're going to go a little bit more in depth and look at the county's master sequence of events list. And so this document is under handouts as well. It's a PDF of an Excel sheet, so it's actually like legal size if you're trying to print that out. Keep that in mind. But that breaks down sort of by hour who is doing what and what the sort of expected action is. If you look closely at that, there's some things that we still need to kind of fill in for long-term care. So we're going to talk today about what those actual things would look like in your building and what are some different scenarios that you could base your exercise on in response to the county's scenario that they've given us.
Yeah, and that measle is a fairly confusing document because it lists everybody's actions throughout the disaster. So you'll see, 50 things in there for hospitals and clinics and
then it says
fire
like
department and public health and all this other stuff. None of that stuff applies to you. You only look to the stuff that says long-term care.
Mhm.
Those are the actions that you should be considering in your facility. So.
Right, but having that county level awareness is a huge part of being incorporated into the whole plan too. So
and this will show the surveyor. This is proof that this is a full-scale exercise. There's multiple agencies involved. It's the whole community that, or I shouldn't say the entire community, but the healthcare community gets together and does this exercise as a whole. So.
Right. So even if your main action is just hopping on ReadyNet and responding to the alerts on there, still print out all these things that we're putting under handouts and just put together a little packet for that surveyor, because all of these different documents, they add up to what is commonly called like a situation manual for exercises. So we're kind of giving it to you piece by piece here, but definitely collecting all of these. Also, all of these are posted on the DPP website under LA County. They're all there in one place. I know that over the past couple webinars, I've been trying to put this stuff on Dropbox, and that was giving some people some trouble. I'm not quite sure what happened there, so I'm not going to do Dropbox anymore. It'll just all go on our webpage for LA County. And that link is right there on the screen right now, so that's a great thing to bookmark because I update that like all the time.
Yeah, and that last bullet point, the after action report, I think on the next webinar, we'll put this as an agenda item to actually go through all the categories in the after action report, because maybe the most critical of all of these documents is that after action report, because this is proof. One, that you exercised, and two, it gives you that actionable information from the exercise that justifies why you participate in exercises. So it's not an overly complex thing. It does take time to do because it's a narrative-based format. So you have to kind of use your creative writing skills to write up all that thing. It's not like a checkbox or anything like that. It does require some writing, but it's not technical in nature. It's just kind of a narrative of what happened, who was involved, what were the lessons you learned. But we'll go through all that stuff on the next webinar, I think. So.
Yeah, definitely. Our next webinar in January is going to be all about those after action reports. We're going to be talking about the exercise conference. So if you're not able to attend, you'll get a recap of that, and then any information that they pass along to us about how they want those reports done and submitted, you'll still hear all about it from us.
Yeah, so. And so if you are doing, that's the other thing I didn't mention, if you're doing the statewide exercise or the Los Angeles County exercise, LA County wants a copy of those after action reports once you're done. So
yeah, and we're going to cover what form they want you to use. We have a picture of that later in the PowerPoint, and then that form is posted on our webpage for LA County as well. So, all right, so moving on here. So we just want to recap the requirements for testing the plan. So in LA County specifically, there's been some back and forth with the surveyors about how many exercises you have to do. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to really outline that the CMS EP rule states that you need 2 exercises per year, and 1 can be a tabletop at your facility, and then 1 needs to be a full-scale community-based exercise. And if you are not able to get involved in a community-based full-scale exercise, like the one that's happening next week, then you're still needing to do some sort of functional boots-on-the-ground exercise at your building. And then the sort of exception to that is if you've gone through an emergency event in the last year or since your last survey window.
Well, it's calendar year. It goes by
calendar year. That you can document that exercise and then using an after action report and then substitute that for your full scale exercise for that year. So there's been some feedback from LA County providers that surveyors are saying, no, it has to be 3 exercises. This is something that we are trying to clarify.
I'm not concerned. I think it's one particular surveyor that has issue with the exercises, understanding the requirements, and CAHF has made the department aware, and I think we'll work to resolve that. I think that's just a small issue. The reality is, if you do use a real world event in lieu of that full scale exercise, all of those things that we talked about in terms of documenting the exercise also need to be done for that real world event. So that clinically based or that narrative based description of the events that happened, the time, all of the stuff that surrounded it, who was activated, who was involved, all that stuff needs to be captured. Any lessons learned need to be captured. And then an improvement plan needs to be enacted that takes those lessons that you learned and then assigns them to somebody to complete those improvements. So an example would be, you activated because you had a flood in your facility, a pipe burst, and 4 rooms had to be cleared out. That's not a huge event. It happens to a lot of facilities. You have a small emergency like that. That technically would count as an emergency activation if you activated your emergency operations plan, and you activated your communication plan to call a vendor that you would have identified as being someone that could come assist you. Maybe you learned that the person you had as a plumber to come repair those issues could not do it. Or couldn't come for some reason. So that would be one of those items that you would capture. You'd say, well, we had planned on this person coming and relying on them to provide that service. They were not able to do it in the time that we needed to do them. So then you would look at, okay, well, for next time, maybe we'll have 2 or 3 or a backup to the backup. So it's things like that, little things that you can capture for your improvement plan that, it doesn't have to be earth-shaking or really big changes to your emergency operations plan. So,
I think we were on that slide for so long it changed by itself.
They were like, "Stop talking already."
Yeah. So, like Jason was saying, definitely, if you also have been having run-ins with any surveyors saying that you need 3 exercises, shoot us an email because I have the actual text from the Federal Register outlining that. And having that on hand during your survey could be helpful. I wanted to make it a handout today, but I had to kind of pick and choose how many documents I had on there. It caps me at 5. So if you have more questions about that, definitely email us or put a question into the box here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so returning back to the exercise. So if you've been following along with our webinars, you'll remember that this year's scenario is a radiological dispersion device going off at 4 different locations in the county. And so for long-term care facilities, when you're deciding how you want to play along with this exercise, you're kind of trying to not only focus on what you want to exercise, but if you want to play along with this scenario of the 4 different locations being under attack, you'll want to look at how close you are to the facility that's being affected. And if you're really close, then you might be looking at evacuation, but it'll probably be shelter in place for most people. And so I mapped them out, and as we'll see in a minute, there's really not too many long-term care facilities right up against any of these locations. So realistically, it kind of worked out that way. Let's see. So this is the first one. So there will be an explosion at Cal State Northridge. So this one had the most amount of SNFs close to it, and then a lot of these are assisted livings as well. So if you see your facility on here or see a sister facility on here, take note of that. Even if it's a sister facility, you could still activate your emergency operations plan and go into shelter in place, but also think about what if that sister facility had to send you residents. At the beginning of the exercise, it won't immediately be apparent that it is a radiological incident. So
Yeah.
it might just be mass chaos. You might say, sure, send me your residents, and then they get there and you have to do decontamination. I don't know. So, uh,
Yeah, I was just going to say when we were doing the exercise design, I'm by no means an expert in nuclear dispersion devices, but to listen to the people talk about it, it really kind of brought home how chaotic something like this would be, especially in a major metropolitan area. We can think back to September 11th, uh, and how unsure we were for hours after that. When's the next thing going to happen? Is there more stuff out there waiting to happen? And so that uncertainty, if there were multiple devices like this that exploded, it would grip the entire county of Los Angeles and the counties around it. We would be stuck in fear because we wouldn't know. So you can assume that your staff that are due to come into shift, if you have to do staff recall, you're probably going to have a hard time getting people to come into their house or come into work because they're concerned about what's going on. So um, I'd work that into the exercises, work that mass chaos and confusion into the exercise, and how you're going to get that information as an administrator or incident commander, and how are you going to put your staff and your residents at ease, because the information may be hard to come by. So if you don't know where to get the right information, you know,
that's something to think about in your communication plan
yeah,
too. So, who would be responsible for monitoring the news once you know that something's going on in the county, while the administrator is going around trying to sort of control the chaos that's probably happening in your own building with your residents watching the news and your staff probably trying to leave because they're panicked about their families. So, we have a few different scenario examples, and we'll talk a bit more about um, how your staffing would be impacted. That emergency staffing and getting good information in a scenario like this when you're sheltering in place is probably the biggest challenge that you'll want to exercise on, and definitely fits with the objectives. So,
yeah, we may not get to the point in the exercise where you can test all of that stuff unless you're going to extend the exercise out, into more hours and more days. We're talking about the first 4 hours of kind of the activation of the event and the confusion that would go beyond that. But really, that's just the start of it. We're going to exercise that, but these are some things to think about, because if it extended past that, man, that staff getting staff in is going to be a challenge. So, but no matter what, this should be one of the more important things for you guys is to maintain that open channel of communication between you and the medical health branch. That's the medical alert center. That's being on ReadyNet, so that you get the most up-to-date information that's applicable to you as possible. Assign people to monitor media, Twitter, Facebook, social media as well. Those things are probably more timely than news or media. When we manage our response to wildfires, when we're looking at things like that, CAL FIRE issues briefing twice a day, but it's Twitter that we use every second of the day during those events. So, capturing that, someone to monitor that social media is an important part of your activation. So if you haven't factored that in, I would say, assign somebody to doing that. So.
yeah, and even just making those staff assignments during emergencies, that's one E tag under the CMS EP rule, and so you could put that in your after action report as something that you accomplished from your exercise. So that's a really good point. Let's see. So our next slide, though, is just a little recap of how all the ingredients you need for your exercise to get started and go off without a hitch. And so kind of the benefit of working with the county is that they've kind of already taken care of these 3 bullet points for you. So some of the logistics are already done. They already made that spreadsheet that kind of maps everything out. And so we're really just trying to make it apply to you specifically. And then, of course, we've got all those written materials and forms provided to you. And then if you have more questions about how to do the facilitator and evaluator notes, we have a guide for that on the LA County DPP webpage. So again, if you haven't bookmarked that page on our website for LA County, I highly suggest doing that. Even I have it bookmarked because I go use it too. So, all right. So if you go under handouts, this is just a screen cap from the handout called the Master Sequence of Events List. It's called the abbreviation for it is pronounced MESL, MSEL. And so as you can see, like Jason was saying, it kind of lays out what everyone is doing at any given time. And so you can see for long-term care, in here it still says TBD, so that is why we have some sample scenarios for you to pick from today. And so let's see, if you have that open from handouts, I'll go ahead and move on because you have that available to you.
I didn't have it.
Okay. So again, just how to develop your facility scenario. So I had that slide up earlier that kind of outlined the county level scenario. So what the long-term care facility will need to do is adapt that to your facility. And if you want to do like a smaller breakdown of what would happen starting at 9:30, say you've already assigned some actions to someone in that planning phase, you can go ahead and make your own checklist and then just make sure you include that in your documentation afterwards and use it for your after action report. So this step is really just, again, deciding who does what. And then this last bullet point here, if you are going to be using the scenario as a tabletop, say you already had a full scale or you had an emergency event, for a tabletop, you'll just want to add some sort of inject or sort of challenge at the end there. Say you get some sort of news later on that the situation's changed. We have a lot of videos and information on how to develop a tabletop and how to write those injects.
Can I just mention on the second to last bullet point where it says decide which departments, well, a couple things. One, departments need to be involved. In this particular instance, hopefully you're going to incorporate your physical plant staff. Simply because if you find out there's some kind of a radiological explosion, you're going to want to control the amount of air that comes into your building if you can. So this will be a good kind of activation for your physical plant staff and say, hey, okay, we have to stop all fresh air from coming into the building. How are we going to do that? Now, a lot of physical plant staff will know how to set the HVACs to recirculate. They'll know how to seal off the building, but that may not be true. And that may be one of those things that you gather like, hey, okay, for our next training for our physical plant staff, we're going to make sure each and every one of them knows how to do this. So there's that. And then the goals and objectives that are written into this exercise are really super generic. They're based on a set of requirements from the federal government. They give us like categories that we have to pick, and we have to write an objective that fits within those specific categories. So it's not going to fit everybody's needs, and you can write your own objectives. You don't have to use those. Those are just ones designed to fit within the categories that CMS gives us.
Right. If you want to go back and review the objectives, those are posted on our webpage and then also in our last webinar as well. Let's see. Okay. So we're going to cover the sort of 3 different options that you could use here. So, like we were already saying, the county level scenario, those 4 bombs have gone off, and based on how close you are to those locations, you may want to evacuate um, or shelter in place. And so here we're looking at how many, so what your first sort of rapid response would be to hearing that explosion. We have a description here of like a law enforcement officer going through the neighborhood and trying to get people out as soon as possible. Um, and this is just an example of how to sort of break this down and write it in that narrative format. So sort of moving from that Excel spreadsheet to making it something that you can pass out to your staff and have them respond to what's going on. Um, and then you can add to this, you can edit it. This is just an example. Um, and then also, if you're looking for more of a checklist form, we also have all of our incident response guides for the nursing home incident command system. And under handouts, I did include the response guide for shelter in place because we're thinking that's probably going to be the most common one that people tend to go with for the scenario. But we do have one for evacuation as well, and that's on our website. So let's see. So reading these, number 5, so some of your staff want to leave to check on their own families, and you have all of your residents' family members starting to call in wanting to check on their loved ones. So you can just picture sort of the chaos that would start building among your staff and your residents, especially when that sheriff rolls through and he's just on his PA system, you know, like, get out while you can, there's been an explosion. That part I added, so you can take that out if you want. I'm just trying to make it a little bit more, realistic or whatever for your staff members. So I have been saying shelter in place a lot, but I also included sort of a lockdown situation because you may be near the explosion but not able to evacuate. So this is sort of the same situation but on a lockdown. So say you have been starting to get rumors that it's a possible hazmat situation. And so this would be more your immediate need to shut everything down, keep people from moving. Your staff might be trying to leave, but you have to keep them in the building. So this is kind of like a shelter in place, but a little bit more extreme. And then the last bullet point here, the sheriff's deputy comes through and is telling you to stay indoors instead of telling you to get out while you can. So this is another option for you. And then the third one, sheltering in place. So this would be more like if you're further away, it's not extremely urgent, but your main challenge will be that you're short-staffed because everybody's leaving and you haven't really done the lockdown where you try and keep everyone inside. So again, this is probably like the least extreme, but still a lot of chaos going on. Your residents are probably going to be watching the news. You're going to be getting lots of calls, and it'll still be really hectic, and you can still activate your emergency operations plan, document all of that, and capture it for your exercise requirement.
And the other thing that you could do if this is your plan is you could remember we're just practicing the first 4 hours essentially of this activation. So let's say you're outside of that area, but you have a sister facility or you have an MOU with a provider that's within that area. So maybe as a part of your plan, not only are you activating shelter in place, but you're preparing to surge or accept evacuees from other facilities. I mean, if you really want to go out, you would contact one of those facilities that is closer to those simulated bomb sites, and then you say, hey, let's do this. You pretend you evacuate, and I pretend I'm going to accept your evacuees. And then you could practice your surge plan, like, oh, where am I going to put people? Who would I have to contact at public health if I was going to place people in my dining room temporarily, or things like that. Those are all things that you can kind of play with in there. And that would simulate your response regardless of the type of event. If it was an earthquake or a fire or some other reason, it gives you the actions that you would do for those events as well. So it's good practice to do. You're not required to do that, but certainly it'd be something I would think about adding into the plan. Adding into that.
In the future, if you're unable to coordinate with the county, but you still need to do some kind of community-based full-scale exercise, doing that sort of simulated partnership with another sister facility, that is a great thing to do. And then make sure you sign an MOU with them afterwards or before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully before.
Yeah, do it before.
You can do it on the back end, but yeah.
Alrighty, so one of probably the easiest objectives that you can check off for this exercise is just activating your plan. So if you look at that measle, that master sequence of events list, you can see that the exercise is going to kick off at like 9:30. So just make sure, that you don't have your staff meeting at 10, and like just keep an eye on ReadyNet so that you can answer their status report and bed pool information they'll be sending out. And then alert your staff, that there's an exercise going on. You are expected to do this. You will be responsible for this. This is what we are pretending we're going through. So again, just bringing together your chosen exercise staff participants and sort of, hitting the bell and saying go, start at 9:30. And then as you look through that spreadsheet, it'll show you when it ends, when the exercise ends, and then you can alert your staff, the exercise is over, and you're deactivating your operations plan. So again, we have a picture of ReadyNet here. If you're signed up for CAHF, the California Health Alert Network, I think that there will be alerts going out on that as well. And then if you are going above and beyond and doing a full scale and getting your local response authorities involved, or if you were doing your own full scale and organizing all of this yourself, you would also want to alert the response authorities at the start of the exercise. Is there anything you wanted to add to that? No? Okay. And so then this is another screenshot from one of the handouts. So this is the incident response guide for sheltering in place. We don't have an incident response guide for lockdown specifically, so a lot of these actions would be kind of similar, but just maybe a bit more urgent.
Yeah, lockdown is when you want to prevent people from getting in. Shelter in place just means you're staying there. Outside of the actually physically barring somebody from actually coming into the building, the procedures should be the same or similar. So.
For shelter in place, yeah. So if you look at the handout, this little box here is on the first page. It's sort of the very first actions you would do. So because Jason was saying that the exercise is really only a few hours long, this rapid response right here might take up the time you've allotted for your exercise, but this is still a lot. So again, reviewing those objectives that you want to accomplish. So activating your EOP, answering on ReadyNet, and then deciding whether you're going to shelter in place or evacuate. All of that would be captured right here in rapid response. If you do the evacuation, check out the response guide for evacuation on our website. I think I said that already. Okay. And again, here are just kind of a breakdown of how this all flows. So during the exercise, you'll submit that resource request if you are doing that objective. Again, if you want to review the objectives, you can find those on the webpage for DPP LA County. And if you are not signed up for ReadyNet, in an emergency, you could still submit that resource request to the Medical Alert Center, which is staffed by LA County EMS and Public Health. And so that's why we got the picture of the fax machine on there. All of their contact information should hopefully be in your emergency communications plan. If you still need that information, you can email me after and I'll make sure you have all that. So again, using this checklist that I just showed you on the right here, that's a good way to document each activity that you've done. And then this back here is the participant feedback form. So if you are involving any staff members in your response, just make sure that you get some kind of feedback from them, just some kind of quick document or comments, and that will help you write your after action report later. to really identify how you can improve each staff member's response and figuring out, sort of refining those predetermined staff roles in an emergency. And so when you go to write your after action report, this is kind of what you want to cover. We have a lot of sample after action reports if you need help with the language, but LA County's done a great job of making it as simple as possible for you to fill out. So LA County has their own format they would like you to use. We have a picture of that, I think it's the next slide. Yeah, here we go. So after you have completed your exercise, responded on ReadyNet, gotten your participant feedback, you can fill out this form here. And so it'll ask you what objective you were answering. And so you'll want to pull up that objectives document that we have on our webpage. You can review the objectives there. Most likely it'll be activating your emergency operations plan, activating your emergency communications plan, and then it'll ask what were your strengths, what areas would you like to improve, and then your improvement plan. And so you want to be careful with your improvement plan, because when you assign it to a staff member and you give it a deadline, you need to make sure that that actually gets done. Otherwise, a surveyor can cite you on that.
Yeah, super easy survey. I've seen it a million times. Surveyor says, okay, you said you were going to do X by X date. You didn't complete it, so you get a deficiency. Even if you completed it, even if it was done on, after that date, or it just wasn't captured in, that's the paper compliance that's, really easy for the surveyor to identify. So.
Yeah, so you either want to make your goals very easily accomplished or give yourself a lot of time to do it, but don't let this fall off your radar, because you don't want to get 6 months later and just plumb forgot something, and it's a really easy thing for them.
And there do have to be areas of improvement. You'd have a hard time justifying to a surveyor who's asking you about your exercise if you had said, oh, we did it perfectly. I mean, I would, right? So, so it's not like you can't skip that, but hopefully the areas of improvement are really small. Maybe they're not. That's okay if they aren't. We want to fix them before the actual event happens. But hopefully they're small, and that should make it easy to accomplish the improvement plan. But if you document it, the improvement plan, that means you have to complete it. So.
Yeah, and Jason's right about paper compliance, but I think providers, they want to provide safe care for their residents, and so this testing requirement really just kind of lays it out for everyone so that we can make progress in as an entire industry. So and then number 6 here, I should have edited that out before the webinar. I just found out maybe an hour ago that the December 13th Eventbrite has already been closed. But still go ahead and fill out this LA County after action report. Send it in to us, and we'll take a look at it, because we are writing an after action report on the county level for LA County. So we are still very interested in reading how it went for everyone. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure, since they closed the registration portal. If you aren't registered through Eventbrite, I'm not sure if they will accept the after action report, so I will have to find out about that for everyone. But
I'm sure they will. It just won't be through that service at that date. But they want to capture all that, as much information as they want, and they want it specifically on that form that Courtney's got on that slide there. That's not a traditional after-action report, like in terms of the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program. But
yeah, they did a
modified version, simply because there's so many different healthcare provider types that are participating in this, and outside of some folks at acute hospitals, nobody has experience with any of this stuff. So, they really boiled down like a 5-page document to a 1-page document, and made it pretty easy to finish this in a short amount of time. So.
Yeah, I mean, even if you can't turn it into the county, I'm hoping that you can, but I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. But you still want to have that on hand for the surveyor.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, really, the goal is the after action report is for you. They're just using it to capture data to see what areas that they can improve on, or help providers improve on. So.
Right. Oh, here's a closer look at it so we can read what those different boxes say. So again, objectives, and then it'll ask, was this easy for you? Was it challenging? Was it really challenging? Were you unable to perform it? I think if you're signed up for ReadyNet and you have this on your calendar, you should be in pretty good shape. But again, be honest about your areas for improvement, because exercises are the time to work this stuff out, and you don't get graded on if you got an A+ or not. It's definitely time for improvement, and so
there is no grade. It's not even pass or fail. It's just let's just see what we got. This is like practice.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're getting to the end of our PowerPoint here. So just to recap, if you are signed up for the exercise, definitely keep an eye on ReadyNet. If you weren't able to sign up on the Eventbrite, but you are on ReadyNet, go ahead and respond on ReadyNet. It's still a good opportunity for you. And we are going to figure out how to collect everyone's information. And again, like I said, CAHFDPP is writing up the after action report for long-term care for the county. So we definitely want to hear from you about how it went. Oh, and take pictures, because I am opening up a storyboard submission thing for our upcoming conference. So I would really love to see how your exercise went. Take pictures, send them in to me, and then at our conference in February in Anaheim, we want to have some storyboards up for people to look at. We'll print them out and display them, or we'll put them on a PowerPoint. We haven't decided yet, but definitely we want to show off all of your hard work, and we're going to have a lot of county coalition coordinators there from all over California. So that is your time to, show how hard your staff works on this, and, boost our involvement. And maybe we'll get a scenario that's a little bit more applicable to long-term care next time.
Stay tuned, because really, I think next year there's a big movement to either do large-scale flood, 100-year flood, or exercise the SoCal Edison and PG&E plan to do power shutoffs. So if you think massive blackouts for entire cities, that would, if you think about your power goes off and the power to the city that you live in and the next 6 cities around it all shut off their power, you can imagine how difficult that would be as a healthcare provider. So anyways, that may be coming next year. We're working on trying to get that into the plan. Our plan originally was to do flood, but I think that's going to change based on the other things. So, you want to go back to the conference? I want to talk about that for a second. So,
okay. Before we talk about the conference, it should say Hilton Anaheim instead of Hyatt Regency.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good point.
That is the Hilton Anaheim.
So we'll have a conference February 20th and 21st, 2019 at the Hilton Anaheim. The registration prices are up there. We've got Frank DeAngelis from Columbine High School. We've got Mario
Garcia from Cal OES.
Cal OES, who's the chief of the Cyber Terrorism Center, or Cyber Security Task Force for OES.
We're going to have active shooter awareness classes. We will have classes for physical plant directors on emergency response. We will have another workshop on how to develop a functional exercise at your facility, and that will be taught by Chris Riccardi from LA County. He's organized some things for...
Actually, I think Chris is down in Orange County now. But he used to be a DRC coordinator. He's now a hospital coordinator in Children's Hospital Orange County. But anyways, we have got some great folks coming to speak. But the reason why I wanted to mention this is we're going to do an award for a facility that did well during an emergency or disaster. So we want to develop some kind of recognition for people that responded well during one of these events. So if you guys have a facility that you know of that at some point during the last calendar year has activated their emergency plan, and you think they did a fantastic job, even if it's your facility and you want to nominate yourself, please, we want to hear about it, because those good stories, it's not only good for other people to hear that there are good outcomes, but there's going to be folks from public health at this conference, attending the conference. And I want them to be able to see how much that our providers care about providing those services during an emergency event. And if we can recognize those outstanding contributions, I want to do it in a way that the folks from public health can see how engaged our providers are. So if you have somebody in mind, please email me or Courtney. We haven't determined what the prize is going to be, but there will be something of significant value for the winning facility. So.
Yeah, and it's like a team award. So like Jason was saying, you can nominate your own facility if your staff really went above and beyond, and you want to recognize for them that. This is an opportunity for you to recognize your own staff. And we're still working on coming up with sort of the submission parameters. We'll maybe have you write like a short description of why you think your team went above and beyond, or maybe you want to nominate another facility that you worked with during an emergency. You were really impressed with how it went. But yeah, so this is something new that we want to start doing. And there'll be some sort of little trophy. I'm going to order a trophy. Jason doesn't know it yet.
Yeah, we'll figure something
out. But yeah, so join us at the Hilton Anaheim, and the late registration starts, I think, February 1st. So take advantage of that $299 price before the end of January. All right, I think that is it for today. So our next webinar is January 16th at 2 p.m. We're going to review the After Action Report Conference and walk you through any other questions that you may have at that time. Speaking of questions, let me check the box right now. And let's see, we do have a couple. Let's see. So Cecile is asking, is the Great California Shakeout considered a community-based exercise?
It can be. More than likely, what will happen if you participate in the Great Shakeout is it would be called a functional exercise, because it's unlikely that you could get anybody else from the community to come play with you. It doesn't mean that they won't do it or they couldn't do it, but if you called your fire department and say, hey, I'm going to do the Great Shakeout and I'm going to pretend like I need to evacuate my facility and I need assistance, or I need, something like that. The likelihood of them participating with you is probably very low, because they have other functions. So it's unlikely they do that. So what the Great Shakeout, what we see most people that use that as an exercise or even as a drill, they do it as they simulate engagement within the community, but it's more about your functional response, the response of your staff, and making that the exercise itself. And it's all based on, obviously, the Great Shakeout is only earthquake. That's kind of what it does. So if that's what you want to test, you can certainly do that at that time. But getting somebody to actually participate with you to make it community-based would be